What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are here with Avengers Armageddon. This is the summer event for Marvel Comics. And what this does is this initially opens up with the Red Hulk, because he's the main villain of the entire storyline. And he says, weakness. It feels like all my life I have fought against it. Weakness in the people around me, in our institutions, in America's actions on the global stage. We should have stopped Doom years ago. Instead, he imprisoned me and took over the world for more than a moment. And America sat to the side again. So I stepped in, took Latveria, made it safe and ready for democracy. Now, that's kind of been the story of what's been going on with Red Hulk in Marvel Comics recently, which is to say, the event that he's talking about where Dr. Doom took over the world, that was one world under Doom. And as most people know, Dr. Doom died at the end of it. During that storyline, he took Red Hulk prisoner and kept him for a period of time. But in the absence of Dr. Doom, Red Hulk has stepped in and seized control of Latveria for itself. Now, the cool thing about this is he says, my own country tried to take me out. The United States tried to do that. They don't understand. Doom left me a gift, a weapon that ensures victory, ensuring global democracy, and ensuring a world of freedom. Now, that's one of the cool things about this is that he's not purely a villain. He's a villain who thinks he's doing the right thing. And so that's why once he goes out into what's called Democracy City, with Latveria being renamed to New America, he hikes up the new American flag within the kingdom of Latveria. Now let's talk about this for a second. So as some of you may or may not know, in the aftermath of Dr. Doom's death during One World Under Doom, Latveria turned into a shit show, quite literally. And it's not the first time we've seen that happen. For example, when Dr. Doom quote unquote died in Fantastic Four issue number 200, that the country was taken over by a guy named Zorba Fortunov, and it turned out he was a terrible leader. He promised free and fair elections, but just ended up becoming a dictator. In some ways, it looks like Marvel and Chip Zdarsky are retreading those waters, but in other ways, it's different. So when Dr. Doom died, you had a multitude of things happening. Latveria effectively fell into a state of civil war. You had warlords, petty strongmen, any number of rebel factions and groups that were out there, all vying for power to take control of the country, to say nothing of the international community's response. Because Dr. Doom had all kinds of different artifacts and things like that at his disposal, what you end up getting was a story called Dungeons of Doom, where literally people were trying to pilfer these various artifacts that Dr. Doom had and use them for their own ends. That's how Red Hulk factors into this, is because Thunderbolt Ross arrived in Latveria and said, hey, we are going to transform this country and we are going to turn it into my vision of a free and democratic society, and then force the world to follow suit. This led to Nick Fury basically reforming S.H.I.E.L.D., but not really, right? S.H.I.E.L.D. is just Nick Fury. That's effectively it. But Nick Fury ended up reforming S.H.I.E.L.D. and then bringing in Steve Rogers with the intention of going in and both dealing with the Red Hulk and trying to stabilize the country. But it was all supposed to be under the radar. It was a Black Ops mission. Steve Rogers didn't originally want to do it, but then he decided to do it anyway because, again, it's providing freedom and security to a country that has otherwise never had it and probably wouldn't have it under Red Hulk. And that ultimately led to a fight between the two of them where Red Hulk beat the hell out of Steve Rogers and left him in a coma. But this is why when you switch over to the United Nations and you have the UN Secretary General as well as Reed Richards watching this broadcast, Thunderbolt Ross is broadcasting from Latveria and says things like, the world suffered under the dictator Victor Von Doom and his eradication of human rights, the right to assembly, to democracy. This would have been even more tragic if the world actually had those rights to begin with. Even before Doom, over half the world suffered under authoritarian regimes or regimes masquerading as democracies, while free countries stood by and did nothing. Enough is enough. My name is General Thaddeus Ross, and I am going to give you back your power, your democracy. Now, that's why I say he's a good guy doing bad bad things, and he's kind of the villain who thinks he's a good guy. Because truth to tell, there is something noble about going into the world and saying, these governments that are masquerading as democracies, but in reality are just authoritarian regimes, they need to be toppled, and the citizens who live in those countries need to have free and fair elections. There's something noble about that, but the reality here is that there's a lot of factors that go into play when it comes to something like that. The indoctrination of the citizenry who believe that living in some kind of a authoritarian regime is the way things are supposed to be. If you instill democracy, would they accept it? Right? Would they even be okay with having it? Or are they so indoctrinated into authoritarianism, they cannot imagine a government functioning any other way? And so that's kind of the cool thing, because what goes on here is that Reed Richards is told by the UN Secretary, this went out live half an hour ago. At the same time, our satellites picked up troop movements in Latveria moving south towards Samkaria, which is one of the countries that borders Latveria. In the old school Marvel comics, they were allies, loose allies, if you want to call it that. More recently, it's just kind of been transforming into border skirmishes with one country trying to seize the other, and there have been times when Samkaria launched attacks against Latveria and so on and so forth. But basically, it's a chance for Red Hulk to start expanding, right? Again, treating Latveria as a beachhead and moving outward, so seizing control of Samkaria. And so the secretary says it would be a very clear message if he were to take a country that is technically democratic, but with a backslide towards authoritarianism, which is what's been happening with the nation of Samkaria. And so Reed just says that he's not going after clear dictators, that he's going after hybrid regimes, countries that have not progressed as quickly towards full democracy as he would like. It actually shows what his true campaign is, that he's seemingly being honest here. And so Reed says, Madam Secretary General, I assure you the Fantastic Four is at the UN's disposal. Here's the kicker behind all of this. She says, no. Hands off. I do not want any superheroes involved in any of this. And her reasoning behind this is really fascinating. And while it is easy to say that it comes off the heels of One World Under Doom, honestly, this has been a long time coming for the non-superpowered members of humanity. She says, I have no doubt that you're good people and have done good things for all of us, things that I'm sure I'm not even aware of. But the world, the normal world, is tired of standing on the sidelines as people with powers do whatever they want while the human casualties keep piling up. Now, we've heard this argument before, right? I mean, Civil War is the most notable example of it, right? When Nitro took mutant growth hormone, he was ambushed by New Warriors, self-detonated, and blew up Stamford, Connecticut. The response of the government was, we're tired of getting caught in the collateral damage of superheroes. For those of you guys who don't know, this is how iconic Civil War was, right? That the after effects of that story and the themes of that story are still being felt to this day. It's considered the greatest crossover event in the history of Marvel Comics. But the response of Reed is, look, I mean, we're only really here to help. And she says, yeah, you always are. But the reality here is, how many attacks would the human race have not had to endure had it not been for you? The reality is that with all these superheroes, you guys put the earth in crosshairs. And the result is that we as human beings get caught in those crosshairs. But the truth here is that this is something that we need to be able to handle on our own. And a lot of it seems to be rooted in humanity's desire to prove that they don't need superheroes for everything. But I would say collateral damage really seems to be the bigger part of it. So she says, I am going to advise the UN Security Council that the United Nations needs to hit Ross and his followers hard, that people, real people, need to tackle these superpowered menaces and take back control of our destinies and out of the hands of the unelected people playing God. Now, get out of my office. Again, this is a pretty cool exchange between the two of them. But what's really interesting about this, and not even Reed knows it yet, the Red Hulk has an ace up his sleeve, right? It's really, really cool, right? So what ends up happening is you switch over to Bucky Barnes, who's just kind of keeping an eye on Steve Rogers while he's in this coma. Technically, Steve Rogers' spirit is fighting in hell, which is one of the cool themes that came out of the Captain America comics. But Bucky's just kind of sitting here watching Steve Rogers and is pissed off about everything that went on. I mean, hell, dude, this guy guy got beat within an inch of his life. And so Sam Wilson shows up and tells him it's time to go. And at this point, we get a kind of unofficial reformation of the Avengers. And the reason why I say that is because the Avengers are currently disbanded. Carol Danvers ended the team because according to her, it served its purpose, quote unquote. So it was really just a way for Marvel to end the Avengers, launch this event, and then reform them as a new team. But she says, so we're just supposed to sit back, or we're the enemy? Is that really what this is? And Reed just tells her, I mean, it was unsubtle, but that's effectively what we were told, right? Stay on the sidelines, do not get involved. And so Namor, and hearing all of this, is like, the biases of your United Nations have never been hidden from Namor, as they've rejected our petition in Atlantis to join their paltry organization more than once. Now, I think it's hilarious he refers to it as a paltry organization while also applying to it. It's like asking a girl out, she says no, and you say, well, fine, I didn't want to date you anyway. Like, it's the most Namor the Submariner response that a person could possibly have, right? And he's just like, they're terrified of our powers, no doubt. But that's when Sam Wilson shows up alongside Bucky. And of course, with Steve Rogers in a coma, there's a lot of apologies that go on. You know, I'm so sorry, Sam. I'm sorry, Bucky. I know Steve meant a lot to you, that kind of thing. But that's when Spider-Man shows up here. And what's really interesting, right? Spider-Man appears and says, is this the meeting for Heroes Anonymous, right? My name's Spidey, and I'm addicted to getting blamed for bad guys doing bad things, which is true. And he just says, I'm sorry, Ben. Like, I joke when I'm nervous or sad or anxious. And Ben's like, you're never not joking. And that's when Spider-Man's just like, that's the beauty of it all, Ben. Anxiety, the gift that keeps on giving. Well, the funny thing here is that you do pick up with Vision, who's kind of been here for a little while. And in fact, he was told by Tony Stark that when everybody gets here, to have them meet him inside, that until then, he's basically just working. And so when they show up here, what Tony's been doing is basically what Tony always does in situations like this. Whenever you have a huge event in Marvel Comics that Tony Stark didn't necessarily see coming, he oftentimes blames himself for the fact that the event ever happened at all. And it's not one of these shortcomings of his character, it's actually just built into the writing of his character. Within Marvel Comics, Tony Stark is a futurist, and that's one of the things that makes him different from a lot of the other geniuses that exist in Marvel Comics. Moon Girl, or Reed Richards, or Valeria Richards, or even Black Panther or Amadeus Cho, that where they focus in a lot of ways on the here and now, advanced technology, charting the stars, traveling to other dimensions, things like that. Tony Stark is thinking way down the line. That's why it is, well, I won't spoil the big revelation at the end of Avengers and New Avengers in case you're reading it, getting ready for Secret Wars, but he's a futurist. He's always looking to the horizon. And so what he's been developing here is basically a kind of pre-crime device, right? It's not necessarily 100%, it doesn't function as a one-to-one comparison. What's really going on here is that this device basically allows him to watch everything that goes on in the world, but it's not everything and everyone. It's not really a violation of privacy. The way that he explains it, the Iron Alert system has safeguards so that he cannot watch anyone unless the Iron Alert system deems them to be a genuine problem. And he says, the system sifts through the data away from human eyes and just gives him impending threats. Now, this is something that can easily be abused, but the fact that Tony Stark was the one who invented it means that no one else is going to be able to access it, much like his Iron Man armor, unless Armor Wars happens and the tech gets stolen. But still, Ben Grimm looks at Tony and is like, so what's it telling you right now? That Ross is some kind of an impending threat? We already knew that, but this is the ace that Red Hulk has up his sleeve, that Tony says he's more than that, Ben. The system is seeing his moves, and they're basically perfect with a high degree of future success in taking the entire planet and beyond. He's using something that makes him incredibly dangerous. Most likely, it's predictive technology. The UN thinks that they can take him on, but they haven't realized that with his current strategies, he's already won. They just don't know it yet. Now, as far as this predictive technology tech goes, it's still a little ambiguous. So one of the things that we saw when Red Hulk was taking Latveria was that Dr. Doom had actually cloned himself, and this clone was being raised in secret without any of the memories of Victor Von Doom. So it's not as though this kid was guaranteed to go on to become Victor. So it's not a Christophe Renard type situation for those of you guys who know what that means. If you don't, it's not a great big huge deal as part of the discussion. But this kid had a backpack, and the backpack had some kind of an energy signature that Red Hulk picked up on and realized the backpack was powerful. Now, we don't know exactly what's in it, but we know that whatever is in it is what Red Hulk has in his possession in the here and now. And I have no doubt that it's going to become a major plot thread in the story. And so at that point, we switch over to New Orleans, because what the Avengers and the Fantastic Four are doing now is trying to find recruits. And that's when they pick up with Rogue. And the funny thing is, she says, I get that you don't want another Doom running around, but ignoring the United Nations? No, right? The X-Men have been around long enough to know that when things go sideways, it's going to be us that they blame, right? They're going to dismiss anything that you guys did, and they're going to take the first opportunity to say, well, if the mutants hadn't been involved, then nothing would have gone sideways. Everybody blames us for everything. The fairy godmother blames us for stuff, right? And that's where Tony's just like, this is important, Rogue, right? We need everybody on this. But the response of Rogue? No, right? We are dealing with a lot right now, right? We need to stay and protect mutants. And she asked him, did you try Cyclops' team? And Tony says, yeah, Carol did. And he said the exact same thing. They would join if things went south. But the funny thing about this is that Wolverine, in hearing all of this, is like, I heard a nasty rumor that S.H.I.E.L.D. is back. So where's Fury in all of this? And Bucky just tells him, right, S.H.I.E.L.D. is Fury right now. And he's doing his own mission, right? He's looking for firepower in case things go sideways. And so that's when Wolverine tells him, if firepower is what you're looking for, then I met a guy recently who's a former soldier that just got an upgrade. I promise you, this guy, he's the kind of power that you need. And so at that point, you switch over to the United Nations Security Council. And this is huge because the UN is casting a vote, right? It's 12 in favor with no permanent members voting. Member states shall use all necessary means to stop the invasion of countries by the terrorist group New America, effective immediately. Now, the reason why this is so concerning is in two forms. The first is that the Wakandan ambassador is listening to all of this and chimes in to T'Challa and says, the vote is in, my king. I cannot say I disagree with it. And he says, agreed, Amara. Countries have a right to defend themselves against invasions, and Wakanda is no exception. So this shows that Wakanda could potentially end up going to war against Latveria. But the other reason why this is so concerning is because now we're talking about what is in effect a world war in the midst of nuclear armament and superpowers. We've seen how this plays out in alternate reality stories, right? The Incredible Hulk, the end, for example, right? The whole world is engulfed in a nuclear war, and the Hulk is the only individual left, like literally the only living being left on Earth. It's one of the saddest stories that you're ever going to read. But this shows the stakes of the situation, right? A potential global nuclear war combined with powers. That's the threat we're facing. And so at that point, you switch over to the Pentagon, right? And you have this guy who's approaching the Pentagon. And as most of you guys know, one does not simply walk up to the Pentagon. And so the fact that you have this guy approaching the building, he's immediately being told by the cops, right? Like, we need to see some ID and we're not going to say it again. But after the second time, they're like, nope, arrest him, pat him down. We'll take ID that way. Now, this guy is wearing a Captain America uniform. And one of the cops says, I said that we're going to need to see some hands, pal. And so at that point, this guy rips the doors off the access gate to the Pentagon and goes walking up to the entrance. And in that moment, all these security forces show up and he just looks at him and says, you're going to want to stand down, right? And in that moment, you have guys in the Pentagon who are analyzing all of this and they just say, good God, what is it this time? Because all the alarms are going off, right? I mean, as you would expect, some foreign party goes to invade the Pentagon. Yeah, you're certainly going to get some alarms going on. And one of the other guys says, a powered intruder got through the river entrance. Facial recognition has a match. He's one of ours. David Colton, Super Soldier Program of 2001. Now, this guy is a hoss. And while we don't know what the enhancements are that he got right now, which I'll explain the context of that, honestly, I think he got the powers of Hyperion. if I'm being quite frank with you guys. Okay, so David Colton was introduced in Marvel Comics as basically the most recent attempt by the US government to duplicate the Steve Rogers super soldier serum. And for the most part, it was successful, but as is always the case when it comes to this, there's some kind of a caveat. In the case of David Colton, it sent his heart haywire. Quite literally, it shut down early. So in his chest right now, he actually has the arc reactor technology of Tony Stark. It's the only thing keeping him alive. But what we also know is that Marvel had something called origin boxes. There's a whole story behind it that doesn't really matter for this. What matters is that in the team-up story between Wolverine and David Colton almost died. And so Wolverine ended up giving him the origin box, which gave him a whole new host of powers. Before the origin box, he just had Steve Rogers' abilities, enhanced speed and durability and strength and so on and so forth, and that was it. The only additional power that we saw that he got by way of the origin box was flight. But in this instance, we get a whole lot more, because what ends up showing up here when he busts into this room, the Avengers arrive, Carol Danvers, Vision, and Sam Wilson to be more specific, and they immediately tell him to stand down. Right? Like, get away from all those guys. And the funny thing is, Sam Wilson says, this is Carol, I'm Sam. Despite her blasting you with her energy, we're here to talk, David. And David just says, that's not necessary. I wasn't going to hurt them in the first place. And Carol, of course, ever the hothead, is just like, you could have fooled us, and immediately goes charging into him. And he's just like, girl, you better come strong. Grabs her by the neck, like literally chokes her and slams her on the ground, and does it without missing a beat, right? And then he says, I'm not a liar, right? I don't want to hurt people. I'm here to save people by shutting down these super soldier programs so that what happened to me doesn't happen to anybody else. Because Sam Wilson throws a shield, and because the moment was so popular in Captain America and the Winter Soldier when Bucky Barnes caught it, that now Marvel does it all the time. And David Colton does this exact same thing. And Sam just says, we want to protect people too, David, but this is not the way. We need your help stopping a monster who's tearing through Europe. And that's when Wolverine says, look, dude, you're a hand grenade tossed at ants, and we're looking to toss you at a real enemy. This is an Avengers level threat. Colton, you were a hero once. It's time to suit up again and make an actual difference. And so David's just kind of like, but these people, right, what they've done, experimenting on mutants, experimenting on non-mutants, experimenting on people and giving them powers, something needs to be done about them. And Wolverine's just like, oh yeah, I mean, dude, I agree. Smash the place up if that's what you feel like you need to do. I don't really give a shit. But at the end of it all, you need to come with us because we really need your help. And Sam's just like, dude, Wolverine, why are you telling him that, man? Like, we can't let him destroy Pentagon property. And Wolverine's just like, Sam, I'm telling you, with what they put him through, no, this guy's earned it, man. The Pentagon has it coming. Right? Whatever it is this guy does to him, they have it coming to him, and there'll be no arguing that. And so, of course, Wolverine helps up Carol, and Carol's like, are we still seriously going to recruit this guy? And that's when David's like, it's better to have me with you than against you. And so that's the cool thing, because he trashes, this whole area within minutes. But the reason why I say it looks like he has the powers of Hyperion is because while we don't see the I-beams and X-ray vision and all that kind of stuff, it looks like Hyperion powers. Hyperion's one of the very few characters who could handily dominate Carol Danvers. He's got the power of flight, all that kind of stuff. Only time will tell, but this dude is a hoss. Either that or he's just going to be another pastiche of Superman within Marvel Comics. I mean, for God's sake, the dude's got a cape, right? I mean, come on. He looks like Hyperion, but green. But that being said, right, at that point, we switch over to the coming together of basically all these allies. Of course, the X-Men are currently out of the picture. You've got a handful of what's left of the Avengers because the team's disbanded, but Spider-Man has reservations about all of this, right? He says, Tony, this is a war, like, with multiple countries. And he says, but I'm just some guy from Queens. I trust you, obviously, but this feels way above my pay grade as a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. I mean, everybody wants us to stay out of this, and they've got a point. When we go big, the fallout can be a lot. And Tony asks him, right, if Steve Rogers asked you to join, would you join up? And the response to Spider-Man, yeah, I mean, of course I would, because he's Steve, but you're not Steve Rogers. And Tony's just like, I mean, dude, I get it. I mean, I totally get it, right? I don't take any offense to that. He's like, we would all follow Steve Rogers to hell and back, and I don't want you to do something that you're not comfortable with. And so the response to Spider-Man, if we're all out there, then who's here? Who's going to deal with Wilson Fisk if he starts another gang war, right? Who's going to deal with Dr. Octopus if he ends up taking hostages? Now, I will specify, on social media, this caused a firestorm. People were pissed. They were like, this is actually kind of stupid. Spider-Man does stuff like this all the time. Why is Marvel just kind of hand-wavily removing him from the storyline? Like, I mean, there's Miles Morales, there's Norman Osborn, who's operating as a superhero. There's a million people who can just like protect New York in Spider-Man's stead, and they're all members of the Spider-Man family. They can protect New York while he's gone. I mean, it's not as though this battle is going to be going on for years and years and years, right? So a lot of fans interpreted this as Marvel looking for a reason to remove Spider-Man from the story when having him in it would have made it a lot more enjoyable. But lest we forget, this is an Avengers story. It's not an Avengers and Friends story. So to a degree, I get it. But that's where Colton shows back up. And Tony Stark just says, look, Pete, if you got to go back to New York, that's fine. We've got more than enough firepower. And so Colton just asks, like, Stark, are you ready to head out? And Tony Stark says, David Colton, this is Spider-Man. Spider-Man, this is David. And it's kind of cool because Spider-Man's reputation precedes him, as you would expect it to, right? And Tony tells Peter, David had a stint as Captain America back in the early 2000s, but retired after the super soldier process wrecked his heart. Luckily, I was there to replace it with an arc reactor. He's out of retirement now, and he's basically a probationary member of the Avengers. And so Pete's like, okay, well, you know, good to meet you, man. And so the response of David, right, is he says, I've been following you for years, right? You help people even when you're down and getting kicked. You still help. We need more people like you. So basically it's a backhanded compliment to every single superhero here, right? Like, you all could do well to learn by Spider-Man's example, just so you know, right? It's actually kind of hilarious when you think about it. But still, in the midst of all of this, they get a call from Secretary Renata, right? The UN Secretary General. And she says, Richards, right? I see that you are convening with others of your persuasion, right? So obviously not a big fan of superheroes. And he's like, yep, basically that's pretty much what's happening. And she's like, well, lucky for me, right? That just means that I can address all of you at the same time. As you know, Operation United Strike is underway. 5 countries, including yours, taking on Ross and his cronies. Reports have the initial attacks going well. The people are winning. I know that you are planning to join in, to ignore international law, because that's what you do. I'm here to tell you, keep your hands out of it. Do not get involved. If you do, I will use the full totality of the United Nations to rain hellfire down on your heads. And at that point, Tony's just like, we appreciate it, Secretary General. We'll take it under advisement. And at that point, Carol's just like, well, I mean, we've been advised. What do we say now, right? And Tony Stark just says, I think I speak for all of us when I say that I have some words for the Secretary General, the coalition, and especially for Thunderbolt Ross, the beast who put our friend Steve Rogers, the best man I know, into a coma. 2 words, in fact, Avengers Assemble. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. I'm actually really curious to see what your thoughts are on this down in the comments section. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.